A new community, assassination, fighting, blood. This week's episode has it all. Thank you for checking out Nerd Nation's Walking Dead comic comparison. We're going to recap the episode and get some insight as to what was inspired by the comics. Now without further ado, let's jump right into it. Before we begin, let's get our warning and disclaimer out of the way. This video contains spoilers for this episode and possible future episodes of AMC's The Walking Dead. If you do not wish to have any surprises ruined, go into the corner, crawl up in the fetal position, and start to cry. A quick recap of what's happened this far in the show. Alexandria is still recovering from the massive zombie invasion. Rick and Daryl have gone out on a supply run where they find Jesus. They fight Jesus. They knock out Jesus. Take Jesus back to Alexandria where Jesus frees himself. Oh Lord. Up to this point in the comics, Abraham and Michonne have gone on a supply run where they're the ones who would find Jesus. They get their asses kicked by Jesus, Rick talks to Jesus, Rick knocks out Jesus, and Jesus is brought back to Alexandria where he remains tied up a prisoner. Okay, no more Jesus talk. We start the show off the next morning before everyone realizes Jesus has freed himself. Carl finds him and confronts him, pointing his gun and ready to shoot just as Rick comes out saying it's okay. They all sit down in the kitchen to have a discussion where Jesus admits to them he's escaped last night and checked out their situation. He tells them he's looking for more communities to trade with, and the place he's from has plenty to offer in the way of food. Maggie seems surprised by the mention of multiple communities, asking, "Wait, you're looking for more settlements? You mean you're already trading with other groups?" To which Jesus replies, "Your world is about to get a lot bigger."
Your world's about to get a whole lot bigger.
The group makes preparations for the journey over. Carl is asked to go but insists on staying behind due to his injury, and with that, Rick, Michonne, Glenn, Maggie, and Abraham and the captive Jesus pile into the RV and head off. During their drive over, Rick spots a crash that seems to be recent. Jesus recognizes the car as one from his community and pleads with them to stop and help. Following some tracks back to a small building, Maggie stays outside to keep watch over Jesus, and it's now that he's cuffed. Inside, Rick and Michonne find two residents from HillTop, Birdie and Wesley. Daryl and Glenn find Dr. Carson, and Abraham finds an injured Freddy. Back in the RV, Dr. Carson introduces himself and lets Glenn and Maggie know he's an obstetrician. He offers to help with the pregnancy as a thank you for saving him.
Well, I was an obstetrician before, and I most definitely owe you.
After some driving, the RV gets stuck in the mud with Rick commenting a storm must have passed through recently. Jesus tells them not to worry because they've arrived. Getting out of the RV, the group looks up into the distance to the wall of the community, and Jesus telling them, "That's it. That's the HillTop."
That's the HillTop.
In the comics, Jesus remains tied up and never escapes during his stay in Alexandria. He seems very concerned with getting Rick and his group to trust him, and breaking loose to scout the community probably wouldn't be a good start. Left out entirely from the show was Rick's distrust of Jesus. Thinking his group is out there somewhere, he gets everyone ready for what he believes to be an imminent attack. Tasks are assigned out to everyone, and a party is formed to go search for them. He also interrogates Jesus while he's tied up in a cell before joining Abraham and Michonne on the search. Andrea, who never died in the comics, stays up top on lookout. After searching for quite some time and not finding anything, Rick decides to put his trust in Jesus, knowing that they're tough enough to defeat them, even if it does happen to be a trap. He comes back and finds that Carl snuck down to the cell and was talking with Jesus the whole time. Rick informs him that he will trust him, but he must remain tied up for the trip. For the ride over, they take a small van, not an RV. Also, Abraham and Maggie never go along. She offers to stay behind to watch Carl, who, contrast to the TV show, wants to go alone but is ordered to stay behind. Like in the show, Michonne goes as well, but the pair are by no means a couple. Joining them is Glenn and Andrea, and with that, they pile into the small van with Jesus and head off to the HillTop. Similar to the show, the group does stop during their trip, but it's not to help anyone, only to camp for the night. At this stop, Rick finds a stowaway Carl. They also fight walkers like in the show, but in the comics, Jesus lends his assistance, showing he can fight even when tied up. The next morning, it starts raining heavily. They come to a stop close to the HillTop, but not because they get stuck. Jesus tells them he's gotta pee, and it's here that Jesus shows, similar in the show, that he was able to free himself from his bindings and was only pretending to be captured to test them. As they exit the van, he tells them, "Welcome to HillTop." As they walk up to the road to the main gate, they're greeted by two men pointing spears at them. They demand their guns to be taken away, and after a brief showdown, Dr. Carson vouches for them, and the gates are open.
Look, we vouch for these people. Right? They saved us out there.
As they go in, we get a wide view of HillTop. Jesus gives them a quick tour, stating a lot of the residents are FEMA refugees who brought the trailers with them. Myself, I like how they give a little backstory in the show, as in the comics there's no mention of any of this. Jesus then takes them to Barrington House, where Gregory comes out right away and asserts himself as the boss.
Everyone, this is Gregory. He keeps the trains running on time around here. I'm the boss.
To affirm this, he orders Rick's group to go ahead and get cleaned up. Rick asks Maggie to go speak to Gregory, prepping her to start taking charge, and this comes into play later in the comics in a very big way. They chat about both communities' current situations with supplies, and Gregory outright says Alexandria has nothing to offer. He suggests instead they work for trade, and their conversation ends with Maggie halting his advances and being dismissed. Downstairs, Jesus is talking to the group and assures them he'll work out a trade deal with Gregory. He just needs time. Mid-conversation, Wesley barges in and tells them they're back.
They're back.
Back to the comics, the group arrives at the gates, guarded by Cal and Eduardo. Rick initially doesn't want to go in, and it's Carl who convinces him Jesus and his people are safe. Also, there is no Dr. Carson and the others. It's only Jesus who vouches for Rick's group, and the gates are open immediately.
Okay, sorry about these guys. They get antsy standing up there all day doing nothing.
Gregory pops out just like he did in the show, but there are no demands to get cleaned up or anything like that. I feel the show put this in for further emphasize Gregory's attitude of having to prove he's the boss. He cuts right to the chase and asks to speak to whoever's in charge. It's Rick though, not Maggie, as she stayed behind in Alexandria to watch Carl. Great babysitter, right? Just like in the show with Maggie though, he calls Rick by the wrong name, addressing him as Nick. The whole back and forth between Maggie and Gregory is put in just for the show, as Rick's conversation with him is immediately cut off by Wesley when he comes running in, yelling Ethan is back.
They're back.
Heading outside, we see three people approach Gregory. Ethan, followed by Andy and Crystal. Gregory asks where Tim and Marcia were, to which Ethan informs them they're dead.
They're dead.
Crystal informs the group that Negan still has a man named Craig, and Ethan says Craig would be released if he delivered a message to him, walks up close, and stabs Gregory in the stomach.
If I deliver a message to you, so tell me. I'm sorry.
A fight breaks out that ends with Rick stabbing Ethan in the neck, killing him.
What?
Ethan! You killed him! He tried to kill Gregory, then me.
Rick gets up and asks, "What can I do?" And Jesus tells him to put the gun away, he's done enough.
What can I do?
Put the gun away. You've done enough.
Back in Barrington House, Rick questions Jesus about Negan and is told that he leads a group called the Saviors. Daryl offers to take out Negan and his Saviors for food, medicine, and a cow.
We want food, medicine, one of them cows.
He describes their encounter on the road with Negan's men. Rick says they never had an issue with confrontation, and Jesus heads off to bring the offer to Gregory. Meeting with him in his room, Maggie convinces him to take the offer, saying in the long run it'll be worth it. She then gets very sinister and demands half of everything HillTop has up front to seal the deal. She tells the group the deal is done, and Rick convinces Andy to go with them while they're packing up the RV, saying they need inside knowledge on what they're dealing with.
We need your help.
We need you to come.
This sequence plays out very similar in the comics with a few changes. Ethan is alone, Andy is dead by the hands of Negan, along with a man named David. Also, there is no mention of anyone named Craig, so he's probably back in South Park. Also, it's Crystal who's being held captive, though Jesus believes her to be dead already. The fight breaks out just like in the show, leaving poor Ethan dead again. What's left out of the show, though, is the emotionless reality of Rick when he mentions Ethan might turn soon, if not brained. Also differing from the show, the group immediately questions Jesus about Negan, though up to this point they've had no prior contact with anyone from the Saviors. They're led inside to explain further. In the comics, though, however, Negan's group does offer protection from the undead, so they're not quite as evil as the show makes them seem. At least not yet. Also, during their conversation, it's Carl, not Daryl, as he doesn't exist. Sorry, ladies. That offers to kill all the bad guys for half their food and stuff. Rick is a little less sinister than Maggie in the show, as he tells Jesus they don't need half, just enough to feed his people. Rick again talks once more to Gregory, but no deal is made though. Gregory is the one to ask if they'll fight for HillTop as their contribution in.
I volunteer volunteer as tribute.
Rick says he'll take the idea back to the people in Alexandria. Dissimilar from the show, there is no demand up front for half their stuff. Only Rick asking for some supplies is a measure of good faith. Gregory agrees, and the group packs up for the trip back home. However, Jesus does not join them and stays in HillTop. Before they leave, Rick gives a very inspirational speech to his group, concluding the volume, A Larger World. So what were your thoughts on this week's episode? Do you like the kind of darker path that Maggie's going down? Leave your comments in the section below. Thumb up if you like these, share and subscribe. Until next time, keep on walking.